very general. But I would agree that the paper is often more complex. I would say it's deeper. Oh, that was me. Right? It's usually deeper, and it requires you to put. It usually gives you more information at depth about a subject. Right? That makes it more challenging to fit the information in your head because it requires a certain depth of thought. Books tend to not be that deep. Not all the time, but on the whole they're not. But they do tend to be about a fairly broad subject. But why do you think it's easier to read a book then? So you're just going with the depth thing. Books have a properly compartmentalized structure. They're called chapters. Right? Now, often in a book, each chapter is about a different thing. So what that allows the writer to do is to have a block of text that is about a particular subject, which the reader can conveniently forget about when they move on to the next chapter. The problem with a paper is the whole point of the paper is to be about one thing. So it's requiring you to hold all the information about the whole paper in your head while you're reading the entire thing. And it's deep. Okay? For anyone who thinks that books can't be deep, I recommend reading anything by Landau and Lifshitz. Okay? Right. Okay. That's one thing. The problem with a dissertation, and why I would call it a dissertation deliberately separated from a report, is the same problem that a PhD thesis would have. It is a very long document. So when you make a dissertation, it should be 60, 80 pages long, right? A PhD thesis could be 150, could be 200 pages long. And it is all about one thing. And it is deep. So conceptually, it is about one thing. And that makes it difficult to read, all by itself. Hello? I'm breaking up on the microphone. So, I'm not sure that's helping. The dissertation will be quite a difficult thing to write in a way that makes it readable, because it is all about one thing. Now, what I usually try and encourage students to do is to apply their skills as a software, as an engineer, as a designer, as someone who makes something, to the dissertation itself. Apply the rules that you have that you've learned for other things. The skills that you develop, apply it to how you structure your dissertation, how you put things together, how you present the information. And by doing so, you will make it easier to read, because the reader is someone like you. Now, reviews are a funny thing, because reviews are more like a book. So, when you present information in a review, you are, by necessity, presenting relatively broad information with no depth. And it's relatively, he says, easy to compartmentalize that information into things which are distinct enough for you to call them chapters, if you like, but to talk about them as a block. So when you write a review, usually, it's quite easy to do block 1, block 2, block 3, right? And help the reader by not expecting them, right? it is relatively easy with a review to present information in blocks, and that will help the reader. Because what you're doing is you're constructing sections where the reader can read that information, come away with one or two key points that they have to remember, and then forget about the rest, and move on to the next bit. That makes a review actually very readable if it's done well. Largely because you can construct the argument sequentially. And the important thing from the perspective of writing it is to construct that sequential argument where the reader only remembers the key thing. And the important thing is that key thing is what you want them to remember. Okay? Remember what I said, reviews are your perception, your opinion of the subject, and you drive that narrative. That narrative is yours. Now, I have a method for writing reviews. Other people have different methods, right? And it is predicated largely on a technical engineering approach to ranking. Now, when you are asked to design something or implement something or deploy something using a certain piece of technology, if you had to design a website to perform a specific user interface task, you would, always assuming for a second that you don't have your own personal belief system about what is the best programming language ever known to man. I had this conversation at lunchtime. Fortran, by the way, in case you wondered. Hands up who's even heard of Fortran. It's usually in the never used this ever category, right? The point is, if you were going at it in a completely open sense, you would say, I have to do this, these are the 4 things that I could use to do that, and then you would construct some method of judging which one is the right one. That's what you should do. Okay? Now, weirdly, I tend to use the same technique when I write reviews. And the key thing, like I said, is it's all about how are you going to construct your argument. Okay? The point of a review is usually to say something about the state of the art, to say something about the technology, to describe for the person reading it which is the best, which is the worst, is it going somewhere. In the sense of a development project, so let's say you're going to implement something, a lot of that background information will revolve around the technology that you're going to use in order to do it. That provides certain more concrete methods of comparing different things, because usually they have some criteria that you can use. What I'm saying is that you should construct criteria for comparison for everything. Because only then will people actually follow you. Otherwise, what you will write is something that the reader doesn't follow. You will think it's brilliant, because you know the subject. The reader won't follow you at all. And if the reader can't follow you at all, you'll get no marks. Always back to Marx. Big fan of Marx. I'm sure students are big fans of Marx as well. Yes? No? No. Oh. Alright, I'll remember that when I'm marking. Okay. Those criteria, in this sense, should form the basis of your review. Right? Because if you are doing a comparison, you should use a comparative method to perform that. Now, what I usually do is that I make a big table, like this. I create a list of features. Now, at a simple, basic level for a review, which is the sort of review you do, you're getting a general review where you're reviewing the subject area, right?
those features are just that, usually. Features, aspects of the technology that are good, that are bad, that have a purpose, what are they for, right? Does it work, does it not work? And you make a list. And then you take the reference literature that you found, and you write against the feature a short description, 1-2 words, maybe a sentence at most, of what the evidence is for that feature. And what you'll get is you'll get something like this. So you'll have the features that you're using for your comparison, and along the line you will have a list of evidence. Now, big fan of logic, me, right? This does three things simultaneously. One, it tells you what are the key references. Should you be deciding which references to use, if you're being selective and you want to cut out some references, so you don't have to go back and review them in detail, for example, or you just throw them away or burn them, set apart, you use them to start a fire, right? The point is, if they don't enter into many of these rows, then it's not a very good reference for a review. Unless the evidence is so crucial that that reference stands alone. And then it probably is a very special reference that you need to include. The second thing is what you see on the rows. So, if you have a feature and there's no evidence of it at all in any of the references, what does that tell you? Sorry? Could be. Well, not wrong. Right? It just means one of two things. Either that feature isn't as important as you thought it was, because nobody talks about it, or it's not a very good feature for the purposes of comparison. Okay? And bear in mind that in a review, you are comparing. So those features that you want to talk about, because bear in mind, these features are what you're going to discuss in your review. So if it doesn't appear, then actually it's probably not a very useful feature for comparing the work that people have done in the field. Right, now that method, right, this is a way of allowing you to be selective about reference material and selective about your choice of features or comparators that you are going to use in your discussion. And believe me when I say, the simpler is the list of features that you're using in your discussion, the easier it is to read. I'm doing my thing with my hands again. Now, the fuller this table is, the better, right? And likewise, there are certain higher level things you do. If you put the references in chronological order, you can also see progression in time between related features, for example. So you should be able to see that. That trend in the information is actually a very powerful way of constructing your discussion when you choose to talk about it. When you actually write the review. Now, why I like this particular way of doing it is it then lets you, it's a way of collating the information that you have, a set of reminders, a set of notes about what each reference told you. It also gives you a structure that you can then use when you actually write the review, right? And there's two ways of doing it, and I'm not going to argue for or against any particular way. It depends on the material. Does that make sense? You can write a review chronologically. So when you wrote the review chronologically, you would start with the earliest reference. You would start the review by so whichever way you go, you start the review by introducing the list of features and what they're supposed to show. That's the core of your introduction. The body of the review is just one long block of text. It can have structures, it can have sections, right? But essentially it's one long body of text. It can be done two ways. Chronologically, you start with the earliest reference, and then you discuss what that reference shows against all of the features that you have introduced. If you do it that way, then you should present the evidence against the feature list in the same order every time. Bear in mind, repetition is reinforcement. The second way of tackling this particular discussion is by feature. So you go through, you do the same thing, you introduce your features, and then you go through the features in turn and discuss the evidence for each of the references for it. Which, obviously, like I said, if there are some features which develop chronologically, so if there's some things which actually develop over time, this is the best way to do it, right? Because you're focusing in on each feature. When you do it by feature, you then create a structure that is more like a book. And what you can do is leave it for the reader to pick up key things from each feature, and then when you summarize at the end, the repetition in that scenario is from the summaries that come from discussing each feature. Either way is correct. It doesn't matter. You can do it both ways. I'm not saying this is the right way and this is the wrong way. A lot of the reviews that you see in the literature will be the former, a chronological discussion of things that people have done in a particular area. Those references are usually pretty impenetrable. Right? So you need to think quite carefully about what information you're discussing in terms of features to make the conclusion which comes at the end all the more, how you make that conclusion very clear to the person reading it, so that they come away with the information that you want them to gain from it. In the particular review that you're doing, the purpose of project preparation isn't technically anything to do with your summer projects, okay? But it is supposed to help you prepare for your summer project. So if you want to think about the three courseworks in project preparation as steps on the road to understanding what you're going to do in your summer project, that's a fair description. So just like yourself, the reader of your review should take the information from the review, and at the end of it, as the review, there's a project plan, right? The project plan, you say what you're going to do, and the review tells the reader why. Right? So I should know at the end of reading the review, why does this subject matter? Why does, not that I'm going that general, right? But why does cybersecurity matter? Right? Why does that matter? Well, there's this area of this particular subject area of cybersecurity which is even more important. Review that. That's kind of the idea behind it. And then at the end you say, I'm going to do this specific thing. Right? Although you don't mention that in the review, I should be able to put those two things together and understand why you would want to do that project. Okay. Questions?
Can you give some examples of features on the
Yes. Right. What projects are you thinking of?
then when
I was going to, let's think about the project I put into choices. Alright, so one of the projects I put in was for automated analysis of biological data sets. Right? Which is something I do in my research, right? So that is a project on effectively data mining, right? An algorithm to data mining. It has a peculiar, well, not peculiar, but a relatively unique background in based on biological data sets, which I have. They are of a particular form which requires statistical analysis and not metrical analysis, if that makes sense. They're highly variable, have strong distribution. Statistical analysis is the correct approach, as opposed to mathematical analysis. Statistics and mathematics not even the same subject. So, that particular project has two aspects to it. It has an implementation, and it has a choice of algorithm, I guess, would be the way of looking at it. So you need to decide the method of analysis and then implement it. Right? So, in the case of the review is automated data mining, right? And the biological data set. So that's in this particular case, there's two sets of information which are relevant in describing the purpose of the project, if you like. Features in this case would be speed of algorithms, right? They can be disparate. This is why writing a review is usually a challenge, right? So there is I would say the key features are variance in the data. So there are features that the data has which you should review, right? Scale, number, dimensionality, variance. There are the techniques, which would be speed, accuracy, and then there's the implementation side, which would be code, platform, accessibility, if that makes sense. So in this particular case, the people who are doing this are who want to use the automated system are medics, right? Not engineers, medics, right? So you have the usability, accessibility, and then technical platform and coding requirements for the thing. All of those are features. Right? But the point is you construct your list of features the way I just said. I have a story, right? Why do you want to do automated data mining in biological samples, right? That's the area. That is what I'm reviewing, not the project. There's lots of specific things to the project, but there's that. And I've constructed a story for you about what needs to be done, right? And then you take the information you have against the features and use them to explain why it's important. Yeah? Does that help? You want another example? Okay. The only other example I'd probably dredge up would be an electronic example. That would be much more couched in concrete terms like cost, speed of hardware, cost is a big one, right? Powering, the power requirements for the system would need to be battery powered. Concrete metrics for the implementation of the real device. Okay. Any other questions? I'm trying to decide whether you all had lunch before coming. Whether you're all sitting going, I'm hungry. No other questions? Don't get Well then, okay, who has a better idea? Slightly better idea about how to write a review now. Who thought they knew how to write a review? Yes.
Mind map. Share the mind map.
A mind map. What's a mind map?
So you can extend the detail on update of this in the page.
Yeah, how's that different from the table?
It may be the bigger
Well, how's it different? We're having a discussion here. You presented an alternative.
If you can see the connection between the topic and the detail.
Easy for who? Okay. You are not the audience of your review. You're also not the audience of a dissertation or anything else that you write. So the key thing, right? You aren't the reader. There's a danger in individuality, if you like. Right? So something to bear in mind is what works for you will probably not work for other people. Right? But having said that, if that is a relatively logical way of presenting the information, so if connectivity is an important part of the picture, right, that doesn't mean that it's not a better way of presenting the information. It depends on the information. There's a thing in designing Ethernet systems where you have like a round-robin connection problem, right? To do with the design of middleware, where what you have is 5 or 6 interdependent parameters which have kind of a cascade effect, essentially in a circle. If you arrange them in their connection point, you see a circle. It is quite. It's not hard to pick a point in the circle and then present them logically, but actually there's value in understanding that they are interconnected in a loop, right? Technical dependency in that loop. And in that scenario, actually, yes, the best way to present that information is to make it very, very clear to the reader that you have a interdependence in the circle, right? And construct your explanation based around that picture. So that, and I would do the picture, right? That picture is a very important key part of explaining how it works. So there are plenty of examples of networks of information where the network is an important part of the explanation. In which case, yes, I would do that. Does that help? It depends on the information. What I would do with any piece of writing is write out a draft, put the information in a rough form, and then give it to your mother. Yeah. And give it to your dad. You don't need to write in English. Right? Find a group of completely independent proofreaders, is what I'm saying. Right? Because if somebody, and ideally someone who's non-technical, right? So if you give it to someone who actually doesn't understand anything at all about what you say, if they can follow your arguments, they may not get everything, right? But if they can follow the arguments and understand at a very basic level the logic of what you're saying, then you've done a good job. Yeah? copy of them? Well, what I would say is that so what should happen after your allocation, right? So choices I'm going to leave open until Monday, okay? Because we were delayed. Okay? So choices will remain open until Monday, and then we'll do the allocation as quickly as we can, starting Monday afternoon, and then you should, in principle, find out who your allocated supervisor is. You should then set up a couple of meetings with them to get some reference information from them, for them to offer some advice, for you to discuss projects with them, and so on and so on. I would ask them for the reviews, because actually a good place to start with your reviews to read other reviews in the area. Right? I can pull out what are you doing? Just general the MSCPs. Okay, I will find a few examples that are as broadly written. It's probably okay in your case, because I can just find a general one. So I'll see what I do. I'll find a couple of examples on the notes page. Okay? But also actually some work. Anyone else? Hi Ed. Jim Friday. Oh, no, I won't see him Friday. Yeah, yes. The academic safety officer will be giving us Friday lecture, okay?
Pectola va a tener. This is the next stop.